Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Rachel Fenninger, and I will serve as your facilitator for today's session. I'd like to go ahead and thank Scott Jacobs and Jani Hatchett with the Great Lakes Trade Adjustment Assistance Center, also known as GLTAAC, for presenting today's webinar on the opportunities they offer mold manufacturers. All of you will remain muted today. However, please make sure that your chat box and question features are open if you have any questions, and we can also address technical issues as needed. We will be recording today's webinar, and I'll have it available for all of you within the next couple of days. You'll all also receive a copy of the slide presentation. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Scott and Jani to begin their presentation. Take it away, guys.
Well, first, thank you, Rachel, so much for all of your behind the scenes to making all these webinars happen. So thank you, Rachel, and thank you everyone at AMBA for offering us this time to really educate all of the members about how this TAAF program could work for you, for your company. So the TAAF program is a program that helps small manufacturers who are hurt by imports to increase their global competitiveness. My name is Jani Hatchett. I am with the Great Lakes Trade Adjustment Assistance Center. I'm co-presenting today with Scott Jacobs, who's the director of the center. He is going to be giving specific examples of how mold makers have utilized this program in the past and currently for their companies. So the TAAF program is one of 11 centers across the country. It's run exactly the same whether you're in Michigan or Texas. The goal of the program is really to help small manufacturers implement strategic projects to help them become more globally competitive. If you are in California or Texas, we can assist you in getting to the right center. Some of the things that we can do with these TAAF fundings is the Great Lakes Trade Adjustment Assistance Center and your company, we identify, develop, and pay for projects utilizing private sector consultants. And the projects that your company will use the TAAF funds for is going to be different, and it's customizable. We work with you on how you want to spend this $75,000 co-funding program to make your company more strategic.
Thanks, Jani. Again, my name is Scott Jacobs. I'm the director of the Great Lakes TAAC, and I wanted to say thanks also to Rachel and everybody at AMBA, for the opportunity today. Also, thank you for your time. I appreciate that you can take a little time out at lunch to listen to us. So I wanted to step back and give folks just sort of an idea of the kind of companies we work with. And, the bottom line there is that we work with small manufacturers, and they basically are all privately held, well-established companies. And again, we are located at the University of Michigan, and we serve the states of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. There's a URL at the top of this slide. If you're in one of those other states and you want to identify where the center is that covers you, you can go to www.taacenters.org. So when we say small manufacturers, we mean small. The average company that we're working with is about 12 million in sales and 60 employees. But if you look at the median, it's more like 35 employees. So we work with lots of small companies. Maybe surprising to folks that we also work with companies across just a vast array of industries. Basically, any industry that's got a significant footprint in our region, we're working with. And I suppose, well, what I wanted to say was, if you had to pick, what's the biggest industry we're working with, it's precision machining companies. That includes tool and die folks, short run and longer run machining companies, and mold makers. Most companies that we work with will do 2 to 3 projects through the program, and most will do at least one top line and one bottom line project. As you'll see later, it can vary a lot, and actually that's one of the great things about this program is that it can really address, the situation that whatever company is in. So here's just a list of a couple of the mold builders that, that we've worked with recently or are working with now. A little bit later, I'll give you specific examples. One of the things you'll notice is we don't name names, and that's because confidentiality is very important to us. And, if we work with you, we will never identify you or never say anything about you that we do not have permission to do. Also, the program overall is highly confidential. Not only are we bound, by contract to not divulge any information, but the folks in Washington, D.C. who oversee the program are similarly required to not provide information. And everything that you give us is exempted from FOIA. So we just wanted to make sure that folks understood that. At this point, we want to move on, and I'm going to hand it back over to Jani to talk a bit more about the actual TAA for firms process.
So the TAAF process is a three-phase process. The first phase is we really begin to build an application, or also known as a petition, to turn into the EDA. That I will talk about the three criteria to qualify just a little bit later. Then we build an adjustment plan, or we plan how your company is going to utilize these funds, and that then gets turned into the EDA for approval. So at this time is when we get to implementation, where things begin to move a little bit faster. We utilize the plan, and we then begin to co-fund these $75,000 for your projects. And you may be wondering right now, well, how do I qualify? Let's talk about it. You qualify by, one, being down 5% in employment and 5% in sales over some specific period of time. We work with you to figure out what is the best time for your company. And the third criteria that needs to be met is that you need to be directly import impacted, meaning that you have experienced a shift in purchases, customers away from your company to a foreign competitor just for any reason. So with you meeting these three criteria, we build the petition, turn it into the EDA, and the next phase then goes in, which is the development of your recovery plan or your adjustment plan. One of our team is going to come out to your company, begin to spend half of a day to a full day with you to identify strategic projects that can help your company become more competitive. That is the roadmap that we also need to turn into the EDA. So once that then is turned in and approved, we then begin the implementation of utilizing the co-funding. We, the TAAC, every TAAC across the country, we handle all the project management for you. And we find that normally a company, once in the program, will begin a project within the first 6 months of their AP or adjustment plan approval. So what will happen is after you've completed a project, the TAAF will pay 50% and your company will pay 50%. And that's the cadence of how projects will go as they're completed throughout the program. So the benefits of the TAAF program are there's no fees to apply. It's $75,000 in federal matching funds. We help you build a customizable action plan for your company, and it's a confidential outside eyes looking in to help you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Scott, and he's going to give you some examples.
Thanks, Jani. Before we move on, I wanted to speak a little bit about one of your earlier slides where we sort of went through the process, and that was sort of the calendar time that's required, and it's slow at the front end, but then very quick at the back end, but thinking about your resource cost, how much of your time does it take, to do the petition piece, It varies. It's probably about 8 hours of management time. But we will be putting together that entire document and do all the work. We simply need, you to provide information and also to, review it and to make sure that we're accurately reflecting your company. And then when we get to the planning piece, it'll vary depending upon the size of company and how in depth that you want to go. But typically it'll take 20 to 40 management hours in a bigger company. And that's simply because we're working with you to actually identify which projects you want to do. And that document is both a planning document for you and it's actually the application to then go on to do the actual projects. And then one of the keys of our program is that some people think about it as a grant program, but it's really not. And it's not because, for most grant programs, you get reimbursed. And for most grant programs, you have to justify every project. The TAA program is different in that plan has already justified all your projects. When we get to that implementation stage, what we're doing is helping you identify who's the best consultant to do the work, and then paying for half the cost of actually doing those key projects that you want to do. So I want to give you a couple of examples of actual mold builders who've used the program. And I want to emphasize how they've used it in different ways. So here's the first company. It's a relatively good sized mold maker, injection molds, significant automotive. That 50% number, that's not right. These guys were closer to 2/3 automotive, but importantly, they did have significant sales and experience outside of automotive, and that ends up being important. We started working with them in 2017. And that was after they lost a bunch of business to China the year before. When they came into the program, what they wanted to use it for was really rebuild sales, and as part of that, fill a bunch of open capacity that they had. So, we helped them work out a plan to do that, and it ended up really involving two major initiatives. The first was really prospecting and lead development. So at the front end of the sales funnel, really going out and identifying and quantifying, potential business from, current past customers as well as adjacent customers in the markets they were already functioning in, and really trying to get all the way to the RFQ process. And we actually did multiple lead development projects, over more than 2 years. So that was the big focus, was lead development. But then we also followed up with a different consultant who took a bunch of the leads that were developed and tried to drive those all the way to POs. So, they really ended up working with whoever was doing the quoting, and then engaging with the customer, to try to really get to that final sale. This person also helped with, sales and marketing stuff. Things that I remember were, trade show help and exhibiting. But so that's what these guys did. So they had something that was focused on the beginning of the sales process, and then, pretty much, where the rubber hits the road at the end. An important thing about these guys is they had two co-owners, and both of these co-owners actually had sales experience. They're sales guys, and in our experience, that's pretty unusual. And the important thing there is these guys had the ability to do all this work. But one of the ways that this program can help is, even if you have the internal capability to do something, if you don't have the bandwidth, it doesn't matter. So what we were able to, use the program for with these guys was to free them up from work they could have done, but to free them up to work on their business, not in their business, and really to extract them from that sales function until we really got to the closing. So these guys were really able to step back and do the other things that they needed to do because they used the program to do so much sales development. So the results of this were they came in, I think it was 2017, and 2018 was an okay year. In 2019, they had a record sales year. And that was largely because a bunch of the work that they did internally and that they used the TAA program for. COVID hit, they took a hit there, but they're still going strong. And I think they completed the program late last year. I want to give you another example. This is a much smaller shop, builds die casting dies, and they're 100% automotive. And they're in a very difficult place. By the time they came to us, they were really distressed. They had a negative net worth. They were bleeding money. They weren't meeting contribution margin. And ultimately, their cost structure was just unsustainable. It was very bad. And then they lost their GM. So these guys, their goal, what they needed to use the program for is to just survive. And what that meant was cutting costs, improving productivity, and then ultimately, after doing that, to try to rebuild sales. When we started working with these guys, when we were in that planning phase, we identified a number of projects that they really need to do operationally. Cutting costs was a huge one, but also their quoting process. First of all, their costing wasn't very accurate. Their standards were problematic, but just their process of quoting was really cumbersome and not codified. And so they weren't able to get quotes out quickly. Similarly, they had a partial implementation of Job Boss that was more trouble than it was worth. So when we were in the planning process, so what we were assuming we were going to do is focus on a bunch of those sort of incremental problems on the shop floor. But when the company lost their plant manager, that whole thing changed. What they needed was somebody to come in and run the daily operation of the business. And so that's what they used the program for. So, for basically a little over a year, they were able to have someone come in from the outside and handle that operations management function, getting product out the door. At the same time, a bunch of those projects that we'd identified within the broader plan, he was also able to really get those started and moving forward. So the quoting, a bunch of the productivity improvement things, and ERP. So that interim management project, ended up focusing on really day-to-day, during COVID, getting the product out the door, but still, dealing with those longer-term problems. So that was their first, and that was the big project that we did with them. But at the same time, as we moved forward, we did another sales support project, somewhat similar to that, the combination of the two projects in the example I gave before. But that was really to ultimately try to drive and win additional new sales. Finally, during the period where we were doing those first two projects, they had a negative surveillance audit. And that was really problematic. They needed to keep their ISO cert, but they also no longer had folks on staff that were really going to be able to do that. So, through the program, we were able to bring in somebody from the outside to do, all the gap analysis and training prep to get them ready to pass that, their next surveillance audit, which they did. Results. These guys are still in business, bottom line. Also, in 2019, before COVID, they actually had a decrease in sales in 2019 over 2018, but they'd improved their productivity and cost structure well enough that they actually made a profit. So, these guys had some immediate impact there, and they're still in business. We have one more project we're doing with them, and it's going to be some more sales support. So they've made it through COVID and are ready to move forward. So that's how these guys use the program. The last example I've got is really different. So this company's a little bigger, really well run, very professionally run, a little bit diversified, both in operations and in markets. And they really were using a lot of modern technology, not just 5-axis machines, but also top of the line ERP and NES. They were a company that would make it without this program. However, they still took a big hit in 2019. Again, that was China. But importantly, and so they got in the program in 2020, but importantly, they were still really strong. And because they were strong and really well positioned, they could focus on much longer term kinds of initiatives and what they wanted to do in the long term. So what they decided to use the program for was, to further leverage the competitive advantages that they had, being a domestic supplier, and they wanted to focus on, reducing lead times and further reducing costs. And ultimately, what that's going to do is that's going to help you in the near term, but it's really going to help you in the long term to build a book of business. So that's what these guys wanted to do and needed to do. And they'd identified one big project, and that was to implement the newest Visi software. And so that's what we did. And, we played a major role. They used all of their $75,000 in customizing and data migration, I think there was, and I know there was a lot of training. So these guys just finished the program. They, now have in this new Visi software, and they're really in a position where, they're going to be able to push and compete moving forward. So 3 different examples, companies in 3 very different, situations, but because of the flexibility of the program, these guys, everybody was able to use it on what makes the most sense for them. And that's really what we're focused on, is to make this program work for you. And what we bring to the table, we're never going to know your company or understand your company the way you do. But what we bring is, years and years of experience working with hundreds of companies that have been hurt by imports. And also, we have a lot of experience working with consultants. So we know what you can do and what you can't, basically how much it's cost. So we're able to provide that expertise, and you're able to provide the expertise about your company. And we'd like to partner to help you increase your competitiveness. Again, this was the Trade Adjustment Assistance for Firms program. There's a mouthful. We're at the University of Michigan and cover Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, but there are 10 other centers. They can be reached by at this URL, or alternately, we'd be happy to talk to you. If you're in Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, call us, email us, or if you're somewhere else, we'd be also happy to either explain the program or make introductions to to the other centers. So I hope this information has been helpful. Hope we get an opportunity to talk to some of you. Please let me know if there are any questions.
Okay, great, you guys. That was wonderful. I think all of the information that you shared was really helpful. We did have a couple questions from before that I just wanted to throw out there for you really quick. I don't believe you covered these earlier, but my apologies if you did. We had one question come in that was regarding the structure of their company. If you have 2 separate entities that are kind of under one umbrella, Are you able to do 2 different projects at the same time, or do you, can you do one for each company, or is there a limit, or what are the restrictions and requirements there?
Good question. So it all depends on what happens in the planning process. If you have 2 companies that are, are really commingled and functioning together, we would have to submit a petition that that would include both companies in one entity. But then you could do projects in either company, and that happens sometimes. If you really have companies that are not commingled, they have separate books, separate management team, separate customers and markets, those could really be considered separate entities. And what we would suggest really is focus on one, because so let's get one in the program and focus on assisting them. And that's because actually right now the program is being updated and renewed, and it's a little unclear if that second company would be able to get in the program. But if we do them 1, 2, we should know, after the program is renewed, and we for sure can get one in, whether it's the overall entity or just one of the 2 individual entities. And then if we do get in just one of the 2, hopefully we'd also be able to get in the second one. But long answer to say, it matters how we define the company at the front end, and there's actually requirements from EDA about how we have to do that. So that's the situation there.
Okay, great. And then is it a lifetime cap on the funding that's available? Is it per project, per company? How does all of that work?
Yes. It is a lifetime amount, and the $75,000 has been the same since the mid-90s. So this is one of the key things that we're trying to get updated and modernized within the program. It is our hope that that will be doubled. There will always be a lifetime limit. That's the way it works. I personally disagree with it. I think it's ridiculous. But those are the rules. And there are good things about and bad things about being a federal program. The bad thing is we don't make the rules. So 75 grand at present is the max, and that's a lifetime. Stay tuned. We're hoping that that's going to be increased within the next year.
Okay, great. And then just one final question for you guys, but how much time and effort is required for the application process? I know it says that you can pre-qualify companies on the phone in about 5 minutes, but what else is involved there? And once you formally start to do some of the paperwork, what does that process look like?
Well, first of all, we'll do all the paperwork. And it varies a little bit based upon the complexity of the company. The numbers we gave in the slide were really focused on calendar time. And what's important is you've got to run your business, and we understand that. And our goal, our function is to take everything you give us and put it together into first that application, the petition. And typically they'll take 8 management hours, which involves getting us information, as well as then going through in the end and making sure that how we've characterized things is accurate. Then at the planning process, that is actually more management time. It's depending on the size of the company, going to be 20 to 40 management hours. Ultimately, this plan is both a planning document for you, but it's also the formal application for the program. And we will put it together in a form that is able to be turned in to EDA. And we're also cognizant of you've got a business to run. Our job is to work around that. And we'll do that, and we typically will work at the pace that you're able to work at. However, I should also point out that that's the amount of time to do all that front end work. which as Jani was saying, that's not where the rubber hits the road, and where the program actually kicks in is when we get to the projects. And those actually take quite a bit of time, because you have to work with the consultant, and we'll deal with all the paperwork, but managing the staff requirements in-house is something that you'll need to do. So it's important to remember that yeah, there's this time commitment up front, but then also when we get to the fun part, you have to manage that part as well.
Right. Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to present to us today. For everyone who attended the call, we will be sending out the presentation slides soon, and we'll also have a copy of this recording in case you want to go back and take a look at some of the finer details. And it will be available up on the AMBA website here in the next couple of days. So thanks again, guys. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and shut it down, but please reach out to Jani and Scott if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.